fellow travelers, and welcome to the Traverse the Stars podcast. Today's special guest is Zack Kaplan. You know him as the writer of Metal Society from Top Cow Comic Books. Now come join me as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Kaplan. Thank you so much for coming to the Traversing the Stars podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's totally my pleasure, sir. So I always like to start off with a question of inspiration. What inspired you to become a writer, and who were your earliest influences?
Oh man. You know, I always say my grandfather was kind of a natural born storyteller. And he was just one of those, he was a pediatrician by trade, and he kind of learned to tell stories to, I think, young kids to kind of calm their fears. And he always had a good joke. And I think I kind of picked it up in my DNA a little bit. I feel like I always liked telling stories, and as I look back at all the other kinds of things, jobs that I played around with, or careers that I thought, I feel like I always had it in me. And I look back and kind of go, oh, like I had those cow journals that I would just write like stories and like just fill them up in elementary school. And God knows what I was writing, but I was just writing like, Star Wars fan fiction, or who knows what I was doing. But I just fell in love with storytelling and writing, and I tried all sorts of different, variations. I did acting for a while, and playwriting and film and TV, and finally, found the chance to do comics full time. As terms of my inspirations, I mean, I grew up in the cornfields of Iowa and watching lots of Spielberg movies, and so I think I have kind of a dreamer inside at heart. I kind of like to think about big worlds and big adventures and big opportunities. Of course, now I see a lot of my ideas through a more, dystopian or cynical. There's lots of shades, so I don't take everything as kind of clean as I saw in 80s Spielberg movies. But yeah, that's a little bit of it, I think.
Well, apparently neither does Spielberg, because when you look at his stuff after artificial intelligence, his stuff has got pretty grim for a while there, where you're like, well, I guess he lost his idealism too sometime in the last 20 years.
By the time I started to see his darker stuff emerge, I'd already been inspired by him to to dream and tell big stories. And so then, he started to get he did play around with some darker films as well. Yeah.
So have you ever gone back and checked some of those old notebooks to see your writing as a younger person?
Oh, I think they're probably in my parents' house somewhere. I don't what I was writing. No, I don't know.
Potentially your next great idea came from when you were 10.
Maybe, yes. I think I would spend a lot of time, I liked fantasy a lot and sci-fi. I probably spent a lot of time like coming up with worlds and characters. I think I really liked world building and world creation. So I feel like I was probably the type of 10-year-old that spent the whole notebook just talking about the world and not actually ever starting the story.
I think as writers, we've all been that. Even as adults, we're like, I have a great idea. You build the story. You talk about
I've got all 18 kingdoms and all the names of all 80 characters. And so what happens? I haven't gotten there yet, but I'm having a lot of fun.
Because that's the hard part. The actual story part is the hard part, and that's why we never finish
it.
I mean, when I look back at your educational background, I mean, it's amazing. You studied advanced directing at New York Film Academy. You studied screenwriting at the University of South Carolina and UCLA. You're in a bachelor's in theater at GW. So, I mean, that's a lot of different places you were heading to, a lot of different backgrounds you were getting. Was it looking for a path, or did you have a path you were trying just to hone that path?
It was both, Jeff, because I mean, like on the one hand, I knew I wanted to be a storyteller. So, it was me trying to find the right lane. I feel like when you're in high school, at least when I was back younger, I wasn't fully aware of what went on as a director or writer behind the scenes. So I gravitated towards acting and doing that stuff. And even with a video camera in my hands, it never occurred to me to think about the writing, even though I was writing. And, I got to college and did some theater and playwriting and all of that whole world. and I hadn't had the opportunity to be exposed to film and TV or film and TV writing a lot. So I kept searching for that. I mean, we didn't have there weren't I couldn't like log on and take an internet class and this kind of stuff when I was going to college. So I went to New York Film Academy and I learned a lot about film and I fell in love with filmmaking. But then I kind of knew that I wanted to maybe write more than direct. Came out to Los Angeles, tried a number of things. I did a writing program at UCLA, and that ultimately inspired me. I said, okay, this is it. I want to write. And so I went to US. I applied on a whim to see if I would get in, and I got into USC. So I went to USC for writing film and TV, and I spent a lot of time trying to pursue writing in Hollywood, and got a lot of things that kind of got into development but never got on the screen, and always wanted to make a comic. And I finally got lucky and got the chance, and that was Eclipse.
Now, I think it's really cool that you went to so many different types of universities for things like for a writing type classes. Now, how they instructed you in writing, was it universal? Did some have different opinions on how you should approach a piece of writing, and which did you take? Like, how did you take different parts of it?
That's interesting. Yeah, I think there are a lot of different schools and different, you kind of realize that they're all kind of saying different things. I mean, definitely, UCLA had a perspective, and I want to say, God, the name of the there was a book that they used that they kind of that I have around here somewhere. And then I got to USC, and they kind of had a book that they kind of went by. I kind of took a little of everything from what I liked, and I read all the gurus from Sid Field to Robert McKee and Blake Snyder and all in between in terms of trying to find all the different schools of thoughts. And, I think at the end of the day, I mean, there are certain, I think, kind of guidelines that you do kind of have to follow for storytelling, but you find what speaks to you, and so I kind of took a lot of it as I went and mashed it into my own thought process. I suppose being at USC for 2 years and really following through with that format, I probably the USC school of thought probably stayed with me the most in terms of their writing approaches, and but I'm not sure if I could delineate what that is compared to other things.
So you're now the writer of the Metal Society. What inspired the creation of the Metal Society, and when did you know the story was ready to be brought to fruition? I mean, at what point did you think, world building stops, story time, this is something that is going to hit?
It's a great question in terms of, it's like a bird. When do you kick the baby bird out of the nest? Fly or not fly? We'll find out. I think that you never know, but I mean, I had a lot of great collaboration with Top Cow, and they had supported me both with my breakout book of Eclipse, and then my follow up with Top Cow, which was Port of Earth. And I wanted to bring them another idea, and I knew I kind of wanted to bring them something that was in the same milieu, that was hard sci-fi. And I had this idea for Metal Society, but it didn't have the fight drama, actually. All I was playing with initially was this idea of, right now we're kind of afraid that robots and automation and AI, it's moving very fast, and there's that joke of, is it all a robot's going to take our job, ha ha ha. But we all, the futurists and people who like to look to the future, talk about, like, this is something that's coming. The technology is going to start to replace people's jobs. And I thought it was an interesting dynamic to flip and have a society where robots existed, and somehow they had brought humans back, and we're now worried that the humans were going to take their jobs. And so I had this world sandbox that I really wanted to play with, to kind of look at. And I knew after playing in that sandbox that the themes were kind of about our fear of the other, and our fear and our being divided in our society. But it wasn't until I was at New York Comic Con in 2019, and I was at a bar and the UFC fight with Conor McGregor and Khabib. I cannot ever pronounce his last name, but I watched that fight and I had my mind blown by that fight because the barflies in the bar were telling me that this is not just an ordinary boxing. This is not just an ordinary MMA fight. This is literally about Russia's role in Khabib's homeland of it was adjacent to Chechnya. And we're starting to now really get educated about what's been going on before Ukraine, but Russia had been putting a real presence in Chechnya and the neighboring territory, which I'm not going to try to pronounce this region, but it's where Khabib was from. And so there was all this political tension going on, and Conor was alongside Putin for photo ops and kind of very pro-Russia, and Khabib was for his homeland. And just unpacking the high stakes of these two fighters going at each other. And the end of the fight was dramatic, to say the least. I mean, violence spilled out and people were rushing the stage. And I just kind of went, wow, I had no concept that a fight could have such epic implications. And that was kind of when I went back to this idea and I said, this is a fight drama. What it is, it's this culture clash of humans and robots. It's all around this fight, and that was what really gave Metal Society life, and turned it into what it became, and shared it with Top Cow and Image, and we went from there.
Well, one thing that I think that was great about Metal Society, it really is a fascinating read. I had the privilege of reading the first issue. I thought it was really great. And then when you're saying about people worried about robots taking over, I mean, automation is now taking away jobs routinely. I mean, how many people are losing their jobs because they found the machine can do it better and more efficiently? And your story really does kind of highlight the idea of the machine superiority and what is the role of humanity as we flip from having robots being the slaves, as it were, to now humans are now taking over that role for the robots.
Yeah. Metal Society takes place in this future, and humanity's blown our chance, and robots have taken over, and then they resurrect humans, and they have the humans doing sort of trash cleanup of the planet. I guess the planet is, I mean, obviously the planet is highly polluted after humanity had our time here, and the robots are trying to set things right by having us clean up the trash. And but it's the job they don't want to do. And so it's this culture flip, and humanity is trying to find our place. And the story follows this young woman, Rosa, who is essentially grown, like all humans are being grown, and she comes in and she's like a child, and she's hopeful that she'll get to be part of something special, only to discover what her role is going to be, and it doesn't seem right. And she ends up taking a stand and saying humans deserve better. And what ends up happening is the robots react to this rhetoric, and one robot in specific challenges her to this fight. And so the story is about robots versus humans, and obviously there's this really exciting fight drama at hand about who's going to win. Would a robot win? Would a human win? And the preparations and the mindset that it takes to face off. And there's also all this high stakes sociological and societal pressure going on behind the scenes. It's really making it, really quite an important match.
I mean, I feel like you're also making a commentary about sentience on some level. I mean, humans reach a certain point of sentience or intelligence. We decided we're going to create robots. Robots hit a certain level of sentience and think, I'm going to create humanity or recreate humanity. Is there something that you're also commentating about in sentience, a society that says at a certain point, I'm going to experiment with something and create something else sentient? And also maybe taking us over too. If the humans do win, I guess we're flipping back to what we did with robots. They're going to be doing again with humans again.
Well, not only that, it was a lot of fun to kind of play with the history of this world and how it has played out in this way. I think readers who have read my other work, like Port of Earth, know that I really like to leave a lot of mystery to what's going on, but then I leave breadcrumbs. Like the world is all in the background. But yeah, what's funny is robots have taken over, but they're acting like humans. It's a
Right.
human-esque city. The robots, many of the robots, not all of them, but many of them are humanoid. They're talking to each other. They even have media. They're so like emulating the way that they exchange information. And they don't have to exchange information this way. Robots don't need to have a news show, but they're doing it, you know? And so the robots have taken over trying to be us. And then here we are, and they're not letting us be us. So I think it was really fascinating for me as a creator to kind of play with those, where the lines are. And I do think it kind of says something. And I think hopefully when, you know, there are robot stories like Terminator where the robots are robots, or Matrix where the robots are robots, you know, and here the robots are humanoid and humanesque. And so what's this really all about? It's about robots versus humans, but it's also about humans versus humans, because the robots are kind of a mirror of us in a lot of ways. They have a lot of our behavior and tendencies. So it's really humans versus ourselves.
Yeah, and I did wonder also, was there an allegorical aspect to our society in which, in many different things, such as in many aspects of life, groups that are in the minority trying to find or trying to prove themselves to the majority, saying that we are equal, we want to be treated as equal, and trying to prove that they deserve to be treated with equal levels of respect and everything else as the main group. I mean, and then also done it through sports. I mean, a big part of Jackie Robinson in baseball was to prove, you know, I am worthy and we are worthy of being on the same field as you. You need to treat us that way now. Is that this? It's kind of a similar.
This is one thing I love about science fiction, and this is one thing I love about a story that has allegorical tendencies, because, and I like to keep it just vague enough that it can be interpreted on a lot of levels. And so I think it can be viewed as any lens for the other, you know. And I think there are all sorts of these layers right now, whether, you know, it's different nationalities or different races or, you know, anything. We're going through a tremendous time in our history right now, and there's a lot of this, but I'm not particularly I'm trying to comment more on how we treat each other and the other, and how, yeah, you can have someone in society that says, hey, we just want to be a part of this society, and we're different, and we just want to have our chance to be a part of it. And
Right.
that sometimes the other part will say, no, we're not going to let you. And that conflict, you know, I think it's a very human, it's very tragic part of our human society, that we just cannot seem to, you know, where's the Pepsi commercial from the 80s? Like, we just cannot seem to get along and get some, but it's inherent. And so yeah, it's a really, the story really allows us to explore that division. And, you know, aesthetically, that's something that Guilherme Balbi and Marc Olesko, my amazing creators, my collaborators, we talked a lot about the aesthetic of how to make this comic really feel divided, the layouts and the different color schemes for robots and humans, even the letterers, Troy Pateri's letterers, you know, having the letters for the robots be one way and the humans for another. The covers, the A covers, are all about division. So we really tried to take these ideas and put them at many levels as possible for the book.
Now, I understand the stakes for Rosa and why the pressure is on her to win and prove once again she's the equal of the robots. Why does the fight matter to, is it Wall 421413?
Yeah.
What is his stakes? Because he doesn't seem to have this quite the same necessarily passion for the fight that Rosa's feeling right now. So what is Wall's victory in this?
I'm excited. I'm glad you asked that. Actually, we do spend some time with him in the story, you know, and I actually really looked at fight dramas, not just like Rocky, but fight dramas like Rush, where you have two athletes that you're kind of following them both in some ways to really show all the sides of this fight drama. But I mean, robots are not comfortable with human beings suddenly coming in and being an equal part of their society. Robots have designed their society around the idea that a robot has a function and all robots have a function, and they don't really want to share their society with humans. And Wall is caught up in this drama, and he dares to challenge Rosa. But now he's suddenly a representative of all of robot kind. And if he loses this fight, he will be allowing robots to be proven as inferior. So what starts for him as a personal challenge turns into a very high stakes global situation. He's pulled into a lot of that whole very anti-human movement that is forming. So it really, again, it speaks to how people in our society might begin objecting to something for one reason and can get very quickly pulled into mob movements and the rabbit hole of hate and aggression in our society. And so, yeah, there's a lot of interesting layers to it all. But I think that readers will be pleasantly surprised by just how much complexity and drama there is, not just for the human story, but for the robot story too.
So Wool is not necessarily anti-human. He's principled in a different way, but it's sort of like I don't know, someone who finds themselves in a like Rocky IV necessarily, where you have someone fighting for Russia. Maybe not necessarily the guy is 100% for Russian ideals, but he does feel that he wants to prove that he can fight.
I mean, I think I'll leave it to readers to decide. I think that sadly, you know, this is a very loaded question in terms of its modern ramifications. Because if you are not for something, does that mean you are against something? You know, and can you say I'm not against humans, I'm just not for humans? And you know, well, if you're not for humans being a part of our society, can you say that you're also not against them? If you're not for them and you only want them cleaning up trash, then you are anti-human. So, you know, there's this complexity where I think a lot of, you know, we like to kind of say that we can take an apathetic approach to things, and this is how conflicts kind of start, but then invariably you find out that you cannot always do that. You have to say, well, what do you believe in, and what are your values? And Wall is quickly tested in that regard. Rosa is quickly tested in that regard. I mean, she is trying to show that she wants humans to have a place, and by standing up and trying to stand for her ideals, does that mean she's anti-robot? You know, and she's trying to say, I'm not anti-robot, I'm pro-human. And so what it really boils down to is just how awful our current discourse has become in society, and how fights have turned into entertainment value and not really into our ability to connect. And I don't think I have all the answers to it, but I certainly like using this story as a lens to kind of explore some of the things that are going on.
Yeah, I know I'm bastardizing the quote, and I can't remember who necessarily said the quote, but there's an idea that quote is something along the lines of apathy always helps the oppressor. And it's an interesting thing for Wall, where you can say, I mean, it's interesting to be like, I don't care about the humans, but I don't hate them. It's a weird line to draw on the sand.
Yeah. So it's you know, it's a really it's not real Steel, the Hugh Jackman movie, because even though it's also a story about robots and humans fighting in some way, I mean, this is a really thought-provoking science fiction story that also just happens to be about an exciting MMA style fight. So there is a who's going to win and how's it going to all play out, and all the the characters being tested of, you know, their willpower and their tenacity. But you know, there's a lot of layers to it, and I don't have all the answers. I like to share these kinds of stories and kind of say, what does this provoke everyone to think, you know?
Mm. So this issue does state that humans have only been back on Earth for about a decade. How deep into the backstory of this will the series delve into?
I think there's breadcrumbs throughout the whole series. I mean, we constantly get a little bit more. There are some of the characters are the first humans that were engineered, and so they sometimes share portions of the story. So there is a backstory and a history that I thought about and I considered. The whole story or the whole series is non-linear, which was an ambitious undertaking. You know, it's kind of jumping around between flashbacks and flash forwards, so we do get to see some things from the past and see the differences between robots and humans. So yeah, I think there's I enjoy good world building, and there's a fair amount of it.
Now, for anyone who has watched the Blade Runner and a few others of that style, where the idea is, or they make a test to determine sentience, and also I think the Turing test, where you're trying to find out is something sentient or human. And we also debate as well, is when does something like the singularity become truly artificially intelligent? And when we look at that allegory, it's probably fair to assume the robots are having the same debate. Are they viewing humans, debating humans? Do they recognize us as a sentient, independent thing? And what humans have to do to earn their empathy?
No, I think that the robots in Metal Society, the robots believe that humans are sentient. They know that humans were sentient before, and they have re-engineered humans, and therefore humans continue to be sentient. I don't think that they believe that humans are deserving. I think that the backstory of this, that humans were a hostile, polluting, some could argue malignant force in the world that ultimately destroyed themselves in the process, and have allowed robots to come to the planet, and robots are now here. I don't think that robots have a lot of respect for the legacy that humans have left, and some could argue there's some truth to that. I think in the same way that we kind of taunt dinosaurs and kind of well, those dumb dinosaurs got blown up by that asteroid. What did they ever accomplish? You know, get back to work, you dinosaurs. So I think that it's not really so much a question of sentiency. It's a question of who's better, and this is an awful question for a society to ever play with. I think that's the point. That if you're going to have a society should be for all. And if you ever are in a position trying to argue who is more supreme, we already got a problem.
I agree 100%. Another great character in the comic book, and hopefully it's not spoiled or anything because it comes out later, is the character of Abe.
Sure.
So the character of Abe in the story has a great quote: "They began making us for their own vanity, marveling at their own brilliance." Now, are there robots that are starting to see that the robots are starting to show the same flaws as the human society did before they fell apart?
No, they're too human to do that.
Okay, very interesting. That's fascinating. Okay,
the robots are too human to notice their own misgivings and whatever. Yeah, I even do have a scene where the humans are citing their own downfall to the robots to say, don't make the same mistakes we did. So there is this really fascinating narrative of the history of robots and humans. But no, robots in this world are awful lot like humans.
So what motivates Abe? Is Abe someone who is pure in his need for the humans to, have a place in society, or is he anti-robot and his group anti-robot?
Well, I won't go into too much of that because I think that Abe is a very fun, mysterious character, and I think that readers are going to have a good time getting to know him. He is Rose's coach and trainer, and he is the older voice of the human generation. He's one of the first humans to be created, and so he has a completely different perspective than Rosa does. And I think I'll leave it there. But I think that, one great thing about a good fight drama is the dynamic between the coach mentor and the fighter, and those different worldviews that they bring. And I think that it really makes their relationship quite central to humanity's need to kind of figure out how ultimately we prove ourselves to the society, or earn our way in the society.
So how long will Metal Society run? And is it a miniseries? Is it a long form series?
It is a mini series, and it'll be 5 issues. It's definitely a story with an ending. It's definitely a story about this fight and about what happens.
Where can our listeners, and when can our listeners get their hands on the Metal Society?
It'll be out May 4th, which next Wednesday, or this Wednesday, and it'll be in shops all around. Go to your local comic shop, tell them you want it. There are some gorgeous covers by just a murderer's row of cover artists, including Wilhelm Balbi and Marco Lesko, who did the A cover, Christina Kalita, Alan Qua, Mateus Manhanini, Fernando Blanco, and then we were blessed to have Marc Silvestri, the founder of Top Cow and an artist of our generation, do a cover and get it colored by Alex Sinclair, who is the famous Mexican colorist of Batman Hush and a number of other great, just what a collaboration to see. That was a privilege. So there's some amazing covers. Go to your shop and pick which one you like. Tell them which one you want. And of course it's also online, probably through Comixology and other digital sites.
Well, Metal Society does look awesome. Like I said, I really enjoyed reading that first issue. I thought it was a lot of fun. And I like that. And I think I like the fascinating moral quandaries that exist within the story. I think it's fantastic how you're doing that. And I had a great pleasure to talk with you, sir.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. Thank you, you too.